Out with the old and in with the totally awesome. It's 1987 and radical ninja pizza extremism has taken over the world. Hi, I'm Dan Larson and this is the history of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird met in 1981 when Kevin was attempting to sell his illustration work to a small free local newspaper in Northampton, Massachusetts. The paper had no use for his work, but referred him to Peter, who had a portfolio of work similar to his, and hey, maybe they could be friends or something. They got together at Peter's apartment and immediately bonded over not just their love of comics in general, but the work of Jack Kirby in particular. In 1983, Peter and his girlfriend, who were living in New Hampshire, invited Kevin to move in with them instead of making trips back and forth from his home in Maine. Peter was just squeaking by doing illustration work for hire. Kevin got a job working in a restaurant. Living together meant they could set up a little studio, even if in name only, and try to sell some of their collaborative comics work to a publisher. And thus began Mirage Studios, so named because it wasn't actually a studio. It was like a couple of desks and a phone in their apartment with a logo. In 1984, while developing a comic called Fugitoid, Kevin handed Peter a drawing of a turtle standing upright wearing a mask with nunchucks strapped to his forearms. The very idea of Bruce Lee's speed and agility superimposed on a turtle was, at that moment, hilarious to Kevin. Peter did his own take on the idea, making some adjustments, some improvements, and handed that back to Kevin. Kevin wasn't going to let Peter have the last laugh. He increased the number of turtles, the difficulty level, to 4 and gave them each their own set of weapons and added the title Ninja Turtles. Peter inked the drawing and in the process added Teenage Mutant to the title. They both had a laugh and that could have been the end of it, but the idea stuck in both their brains. They realized that there was some potential for this thing that they had just birthed by accident. They needed a story, an origin, some names. Eastman and Laird were both big comics fans, and Eastman in particular was heavily influenced by Frank Miller's work on Daredevil and Ronin. The initial Turtles concept was part homage to Miller's Daredevil comics and part spin-off from it. In fact, in the story they developed, the Turtles are mutated by the very same canister of science goo that gave Daredevil his powers after it hit Matt Murdock right in the face, then spilled into the sewers. Daredevil was trained by a guy named Stick and fights against a ninja clan called the Hand, while the Turtles were trained by a mutated rat named Splinter and fight against a ninja clan called the Foot. Eastman and Laird originally wanted their turtles to have Japanese names. Unfortunately, they couldn't come up with anything that sounded legitimately Japanese enough, so they turned to a book on the Italian Renaissance they had in the studio and settled on Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, and Raphael. Using a combination of income tax returns, a few $100s in savings, and a generous loan of $1,000 from Kevin's uncle, the first issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was published in black and white in May of 1984. And so they sat. 3,000 books, in the living room, stacks of them. They had the books, they had creative control, and they had stacks and stacks of books. They had just enough money left over from printing the books that they took out an ad in Comics Buyer's Guide, hoping they could sell some books via mail order. They sold just enough to attract the attention of some distributors, and within a few weeks they had sold through the entire first run of 3,000 copies. They paid back Kevin's uncle, they did a second print run of 6,000 copies, which also sold out. After a few months hiatus, issue 2 was completed and they were able to make it available through direct distribution on the strength of the first issue's performance. Issue 2 sold 15,000 copies and convinced Eastman and Laird that this was actually something they could do full-time. Making their own comics, publishing them through their own imprint, having full creative control, and making enough money was a genuine reality. They did a third printing of 30,000 copies of issue 1 and followed that up with another printing of issue 2 that moved even more copies than that. Every book they published pushed the numbers higher and faster. Within 3 years, they had produced 9 total issues with increasing production numbers issue over issue. Issue 8, a crossover with Dave Sims' character Cerebus, another indie publishing success story, sold 135,000 copies. To put that number in perspective, in March of 2018, Amazing Spider-Man issue 797 sold approximately 128,000 copies. That's Marvel. That's Spider-Man in 2018.
I like turtles.
To move 135,000 copies of issue 8 on an independent, self-published, black and white comic book in 1986 or 2018 is absolutely unheard of. The Ninja Turtles phenomenon had already begun to take on a life of its own. They started licensing the Turtles out for products beyond their own comics, including a role-playing game from Palladium Books. But the big deal came when they were approached by Mark Friedman. Mark was a big-time Hollywood agent, just like all the other big-time Hollywood agents that Eastman and Laird had already said no to. Everyone came to them promising them the moon, but the duo were extremely protective of their property after having seen other industry professionals get taken advantage of. This time, they gave Mark a chance, but on their terms. They signed a 30-day non-exclusive agreement. Mark had 30 days to see if he could turn up some real interest and get them a good deal that worked for them. Mark connected them with Playmates Toys, who flew them out to California for a meeting that would represent a quantum leap in exposure and profitability for the brand. But as interested as Playmates was in making Ninja Turtle toys, they balked at the idea of selling toys on the strength of the comics alone. And they were going to need to make some cosmetic changes to the Turtles to be able to hit the 4-year-old to 8-year-old market they were targeting. Less violence, no alcohol, less grim and gritty, more pizza, and somehow make it even easier to tell the 4 Turtles apart. A 5-episode miniseries went into production and began showing on televisions across the country in December of 1987. The basic concepts of the Turtles' origin were still there, but heavily softened. Where they previously all wore red masks, each Turtle had been assigned their own color and initials were added to their belt buckles. Viewer demand resulted in 13 new episodes beginning in October of 1988, with the action figure line hitting store shelves in advance of the 1988 Christmas and pizza retail season. Playmates would go on to sell, hang on, I have the number. The number really isn't important. They sold a lot of figures. They made a lot of money.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, heroes in a half shell. Splinter the Rat taught them each the ninja arts. Donatello, master of the staff. War! Leonardo, the katana blade. My God! Raphael, the sword. Don't throw this at home, kids! And Michelangelo, the nunchakus.
Radical! And master of the willing pizza.
Hey, who had the pepperoni and ice cream?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. From Playmates.
With that kind of success comes the need for lots and lots of lawyers. Eastman and Laird found themselves in the position of employing all the lawyers to fight back every conceivable kind of attack on their brand. Random people claiming they had created the Turtles years before, and Eastman and Laird stole their ideas. People making unlicensed products, and even people buying up the rights internationally before Eastman and Laird could, and then extorting the license back to them in order to avoid further legal costs, trying to prove that it was actually their license to begin with. In 1990, with a budget of $13.5 million, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live-action feature-length movie hit theaters. It pulled inspiration from both the lighter-toned cartoon and the comics, which had continued on in their own continuity. Despite poor reviews, it was a box office success, bringing in $202 million worldwide, and it temporarily took the Turtles down a weird path of musical performance tours and videos in 1990, but the less we talk about that, the better.
We are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles!
The movie was followed by a sequel immediately 1 year later, and then a third movie in 1993. The returns had begun to diminish quickly. The market was reaching a point of turtle saturation. The cartoon finally came to a stop after its 10th season in 1996. However, in 1997, in association with Saban Entertainment, the Power Rangers people, a live-action TV show technically within the same continuity as the movie universe called Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation debuted. Next Mutation expanded the Turtle roster to include their sister, Venus de Milo. It only lasted 1 season, but they did have a crossover with Power Rangers in Space, and that's some pop culture wish fulfillment right there that deserves at least a little recognition. In 2000, Kevin Eastman, looking to pursue other creative ventures, sold his ownership rights of the Turtles to Peter Laird and Mirage Studios. He had never imagined that the Turtles could have taken him as far as it did, and certainly had not imagined that he would be spending his entire life working on it exclusively. In 2003, a new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series rebooted the franchise, a bit darker in tone than the 80s and 90s version. It ran 6 seasons through 2009, culminating in a feature-length TV movie called Turtles Forever, which just happened to coincide with the 25th anniversary of the franchise. In 2007, the 4th Turtles feature film, simply titled TMNT, was released. It was a departure from the live-action films of the 90s, but still tapped into the turtle-loving moviegoers to the tune of $95 million worldwide. In 2009, Peter Laird and Mirage Studios officially sold all Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles rights domestic and international, to Viacom, who just so happened to own Nickelodeon, and all of that is owned by CBS. 2012 would see the third animated series called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles broadcast from its new home at Nickelodeon. It ran for 5 seasons with a total of 124 episodes through 2017, winning several Emmys, churning out its own line of action figures, just like the 2 series before it. And in 2014, there was another movie. It was a reboot, relaunch of the franchise brought to you by the guy who had already turned the Transformers into a money-making machine. That's an alt mode joke. It had a pretty hefty $125 million budget, but it brought in $500 million worldwide. Part real actors, part CGI. Whether fans love it or hate it, you got a movie that makes $500 million, you make another one, Michael Bay or not. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows was released in 2016 and only made $250 million. So, I don't know. I guess that's good. I guess. And just this year in 2018, Nickelodeon announced a complete reboot of the entire franchise. New logo, new look, new tone, a new direction for a franchise that has been reinvented every few years, as must happen for a pop culture brand like this to survive for over 3 decades and into the future. What started out as a single drawing done as a joke between 2 friends evolved into a billion-dollar global industry that has flourished for over 30 years. It is a pillar of modern global pop culture entertainment, part of a pantheon of properties transcending generations, with as bright a future ahead of it as the historic path that came before. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you to those who already are. Please share this video, and if you're in the position to help the channel grow, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy. A lot of research went into this one, but there was one article in particular that I want to make sure I credit. The Comics Journal did an interview with Kevin Eastman back in 1998, link in the description below. It filled in a lot of the details about the very earliest days of Mirage and the Eastman and Laird relationship that things like Wikipedia or other casual historical recaps just don't get into. And finally, let us know in the comments down below when you first encountered the Turtles. For me, it was actually the cartoon. I didn't even know that there was a comic it was based on. In fact, I think I saw the comics based on the cartoon before I saw the comics the cartoon was based on. Does that make sense? All right.